He's the executive producer and star of the hit series Hatched. Don't go anywhere. We are ready to gab with Steve Siegel.
The destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Like I did that day.
Take me to the place I love.
Take me all the way. We're starting with a little bit of local Red Hot Chili Peppers in honor of Steve, who is one of the very few original born and raised Los Angeliers.
Yeah, Angelinos, Los Angelinos,
yeah,
whatever you want to call them. As long as you say I'm from LA, I'll take it.
That's right. And we had a little bit of live television for you as the opening went down. Not sure if you caught that or not, but we had a little
Love it.
We're all about the music today. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Terrific. I'm going to introduce myself to the audience first. Hi, everyone. In case you haven't met me, I'm your host for today, Katerina Cozias. You can catch me on Twitter at Katerina Cozias. I make it easy for you. And again, we're here for a special Spotlight On series with Steve Siegel, whom you are going to want to know if you don't already. Steve, where can we get a hold of you before we start?
Saturdays, 1:30 p.m. here in LA, KCAL 9 Hatch. It's across the country, amazing business competition show.
Woo-hoo.
Check it out. It's in season 2. Last year it was on the CW. Amazing, amazing show. Definitely check it out.
Now, for those of you that are tuning in, Hatched has been sort of compared to a cross between Shark Tank and some of the other business entrepreneurial shows on the air. Tell the audience, if they're not familiar, what exactly is Hatched about? What makes it different from the other shows out there?
Definitely. So it's a family-friendly approach to what I'd say like a Shark Tank meets kind of The Profit, where entrepreneurs come on, and in this show it's really about the entrepreneur, less about the panelists at times. And what we want to do is encourage people to start businesses, and we want them to go out there and say, no matter if you get an investment or not, you're going to get some real feedback, some real advice. And the way we kind of partner and look like The Profit at times is we actually go out there in the field. We take them through a retail challenge. We're going to see them live in action. Different than a lot of times you see on Shark Tank where you might not get to see them live.
Right.
They get a 5-minute pitch. You have to make a yes or no. We want to see how they do when they're talking to consumers, you know? And so we throw an undercover investor in there, similar like an undercover boss, where they don't know if they're talking to an investor, a consumer, and they always have to have their A game. So it's a great, great twist on a show.
And it must be really great for the entrepreneurs to get that feedback from a customer base, a live customer feedback.
Absolutely. So it's amazing. So I mean, I think the thing that really separates us is we have a partnership with Home Shopping Network. So we have a panelist on our show, Dara Trujillo, who runs the American Dream segment at HSN. So if she likes your product, even if you don't get an investment, you can be on HSN next month.
Now, and again, HSN, Home Shopping Network, that goes into 95 million homes in America. So just getting coverage on HSN is huge for these entrepreneurs.
It's incredible.
Whether they get the funding from your team or not.
Absolutely. And a lot of times these entrepreneurs might be profitable, but they need help with distribution, or they want to reach a bigger audience. And so what we like to say is, outside of financial capital, we give you intellectual capital. And that means, like, if it's help with branding, with our partnerships, with distribution, or getting you an intro to HSN, that's so valuable to these consumers, and we want to be able to pass that along.
Well, and the one thing I've noticed about investors is that a lot of times they're very good at what they do, which is being the creative guy, but they're missing those other elements, be it the marketing or the finance. And so if you can couple with them to offer some of that support, I think it's huge.
It's a huge win, and that's why I think people are really excited about being on the show, because you get to go through Retail Challenge, you can get investment, you can get a partnership with Home Shopping Network, and like, we've never seen anything that encompasses all that, and it really encourages people. I think even if someone doesn't quite know their numbers, or they're still working on their pitch, right? We want to support them. We want it to be a show where the families can watch together and say, this is why I want to start a business. Look at this encouragement. Look at the opportunity by being on Hatched.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to get back to Hatched in just a moment. What I'd love for you to do is share with the audience a little bit about your background, because, folks, Steve has gone from investment banking into the healthcare sector, and from there came to Hollywood. Well, I guess you were in Hollywood, but executive produced and created the concept for Hatch. So talk to us about that crazy career path.
Sure. So
how fun.
I would have never picked it this way. I mean, you can never actually do it. But if I had to look at it now, I wouldn't have done any differently. And I think starting in finance and starting investment banking was the best experience of my life, you know. And I think it teaches you how to really look at companies, you know, how to rip them apart, what drives them, how do you understand it. I think I always looked at it like an extension of grad school. You know, you put in the hours, you put in the time, and you just happen to get paid for it, you know, and you're not $200,000 in debt at the end of the year, you know. And
well, you're putting in the hours, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, you started your career at Bear Stearns.
Yep.
After finishing at the London School of Economics.
Yep.
Now, that is one of the best schools in the world, bar none, for business. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
On that first.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Bear Stearns, the year it collapsed.
Yeah, so I mean, and I always say, I don't know if I'm the jinx by coming from LA, but 84 years of profitability, and within 12 months it was gone.
Wow.
You know, and it just, I think it shows you how big and interconnected our financial systems really are. And I think for me, it was an amazing blessing where JP Morgan stepped in and bought them. There was an opportunity to come back to LA. You know, I thought I was going to be in New York for a long time. My bank collapses. All of a sudden, we're bought, and I'm back in Century City. You know,
Wow.
and so I couldn't imagine coming back, but it was because of that I came back early, that I met my wife. You know, and I think all of these things kind of happened for a reason, and it was really an incredible journey. And so, spent time in the finance arena, and then really got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. You know, I said, now that I've put in my time and I've spent time on Wall Street, I wanted to start something, and so I had the opportunity to build a healthcare business here in Los Angeles. And so, incredible opportunity, big medical billing collection company, and I think I saw all the pain points that happened between patients and their doctors and the insurance companies, and it was such an education for me.
So what sort of company did you build or did you create
Yeah, it was
to fit that niche?
Yeah, so it was a medical
demand.
billing. It was a medical billing collection company, and I actually
Okay.
spent a lot of time here in LA and also Manila. You know, and so we built a big office down in Manila, and I think spending back and forth for 5 years, going from LA to Manila, was
That
just
must have been an interesting opportunity as well.
unbelievable, and just
overseas.
to see the growth too. You know, and it's an incredible place to be. You know, 103 million people in the Philippines, the most densely populated country in the world.
Right.
Incredible to kind of build and see a lot of these same practices that you do down there versus here in the United States, and incredible. I think it was an eye-opening experience for me, especially at a very young age. I was a 27-year-old CEO.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was definitely an incredible journey, and I think after a while, I said, you know, I've been a finance guy, I've been an operator now. I really miss being an investor, you know, and I kind of want to put it all together. And so stepped away and started doing a lot of early stage tech investing. And I think I started to really focus in the healthcare space because there's not a lot of young guys doing tech who also know the healthcare space. And so that's where all this kind of came together. And through that, one of my childhood friends, Nicole Lappin, she's amazing. She's a New York Times bestseller, CNBC anchor. She was a part of the show called Hatch that was just starting to come together. And she called and talked to me and said, we're looking for someone to kind of be a part of this with us, you know, and would you help produce it? Would you look to be a panelist? And when I met with the team, I said, listen, I grew up in Hollywood. You know, my uncle's prop master works at Warner Brothers, works on a lot of big TV shows. So I figured being here in LA, you know somebody who's in Hollywood. And with that, met the team from Hatch, and we got together, and the rest is really history.
Had you ever, growing up, wanted to be in the Hollywood lifestyle?
You know, I think growing up in LA, you know, you go to every street corner, and someone's always talking about, you know, acting, and someone's always talking about this script, and someone's always talking about Hollywood. So I think it was really in my blood.
Maybe subconscious, it was in there. That,
you know,
and when you moved back to Los Angeles, as you said, ended up being sort of the perfect opportunity to delve into this world.
Absolutely. And I think LA really got bit by the venture bug. And if you look at, like, San Francisco and New York has really dominated that market for so long, but the last 3 or 4 years with Snapchat here, an Honest Company, a lot of these big companies coming out of LA, we've become a hub. You know, we have Silicon Beach, we have everything that we're doing now in downtown LA in the Arts District, and it's incredible to see what's happening here in LA. So I think the show is a perfect timing for what's kind of happening here in LA.
If you had one piece of advice to give the entrepreneurs that come onto the show, what would that be?
So I'd say I always use the 80-20 rule.
Okay.
You know, and when I'm looking at investing in company, especially at the very early stage, 20% is really about the product and the concept, and 80% is really about the person, you know, and I'd say when you come on TV, you only have a few minutes to really get your pitch, you know, and like, it's not like you're going into a full presentation. you got to be very likable. You got to come off, and I got to say that this is someone who's going to be flexible, someone who's willing to pivot, because if you are successful, you're going to have 10 other people who are going to try to eat your lunch, you know? And so you might have a great concept, but it needs to kind of move in a different direction. How flexible, how willing are you to go in that direction? I think a lot of that you can learn by actually spending time with that entrepreneur. And so I'm a big people person.
I can see that. We've been chit-chatting even before the show started. Steve, when you take a company like that, you take a small startup company, and you try to give them direction, do you find that a lot of these entrepreneurs are open to that, or are they sort of protective of their idea?
So I think people are very open to it, but like everything, it's kind of their baby, you know? And so everybody has something that they're usually attached to, and a lot of times it could be the name, you know, and a lot of times they have a great product and I think it's amazing, but the name might not resonate. It might not fully describe what that product is. And the good thing about Hatched is we get the consumer feedback. So if we go and we say, listen, 30% of the people here say that they don't like the name, the name doesn't resonate with the product, I think it makes our job a lot easier, different than a lot of these other shows who are saying, listen, I don't like your packaging, your price point is too high, I don't like your name. People get really attached. I think the great thing about what we do is we want to show them the results. Here's 100 consumers that are coming in on this pop-up store. 30% don't like the packaging, or 50% think the price is too high. It gives us a lot of leverage.
And it's tangible feedback that can't be ignored, you know.
Absolutely, and I think sometimes they can say, listen, one investor, two investors, you could be biased, but when you have this big sample set, I think it's really important for an entrepreneur, because a lot of times at the early level, it could just be friends and family who have put in money, and so everyone's going to be biased. Everyone has the greatest idea.
Everyone's a cheerleader,
Everybody, you know, and I always say, as an entrepreneur, you have to be your toughest critic and your biggest cheerleader. So you got to be, you know, and that's a tough thing to balance, you know, as someone where you might have given so much of yourself to this product, but you need to be able to say, listen, I need someone else to help get it to the next level, or this is something I can do myself, I need to push through.
One thing I always wonder when I watch these shows is, because you commented a few minutes ago about, you know, the entrepreneurs coming on board and just having a few minutes to pitch the product. Do you, as the panelists, get a dossier of some sort ahead of time to sort of review who's coming on board?
Definitely, yeah.
I would assume you would, just to
definitely.
be able to give back feedback.
We don't get to see the pitch, but I have a little bit about the idea of the product. So, you know, I've spent a lot of time in healthcare. So if it's a health and wellness product that's right up my alley, I'm going to spend a little bit more time looking at that one maybe than a typical retail type clothing product, where it's like, all right, there's real feedback I can give them as an investor, but it's not really my power alley. So we do get kind of like a one sheet to spend on them, but outside of that, we don't get to talk to the entrepreneur, and this is really the first time we're seeing them. So I think that's the best part of it, is that anything can kind of happen on that show.
Right, and you get a lot of that live emotion, real time,
Absolutely.
Which makes it for, you know, exciting television.
Absolutely. Like I don't want to be like, oh, this is the same thing I've seen already.
Right.
You know, we want to see it for the first time, and even when you see it on a one sheet, I want to hear it out of the mouth of the entrepreneur.
Can you feel the difference between those entrepreneurs that really, really believe in the product and the others that sort of are doing it for something to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the first thing you can tell is like passion. You know, like you can't teach that. Right. You know, and I think some people I always look at it, there's motivated people in the world and is not motivated, and your job as an investor, as someone who's their manager, is to inspire them. You know, is to locate those types of people and really inspire them and put them in the right direction.
With respect to the healthcare business you started, are you still part of that?
I still do some consulting, but I'm not a part of it anymore.
Okay.
So obviously the business
You're now a television star.
I'm trying. Listen, I love working with people, and I think the great thing is every week I get to see somebody new, you know, and I get to kind of reach out of my one vertical and kind of see everything. And the great thing about consumer products in these shows is that it's everything that's very tangible, you know, and so it's very relatable to people. I don't want to talk about a platform or an internet company or something that people might not be able to see, or a software platform. These are all great consumer products that people can go and order, whether it's on HSN or from the website afterwards. And I love seeing that. You know, I love being able to have an entrepreneur on one day and then seeing a spike in their sales the next day. And I think it's really, really unique.
How important is e-commerce these days?
Extremely important. And I think e-commerce tied with like a strong social media platform and marketing, I mean, this is the new way you can actually target people, you know, and we live in this direction where you're on all of your different social media handles and you're wondering why the same ad is following you around, you know, and so we live in whether that's
we live in a smart world.
They know everything,
right?
you know, and so it's extremely important.
It's funny that you say that. I have a good friend of mine who's from Toronto, and he's going to be flying in next week to be part of the American Film Festival that's happening. And so we were chatting on Facebook Messenger about setting up dinner for Friday night. So we get off the chat, and he chats me back about a minute later, and he says, hey, did you send me that calendar invitation?
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't. So Facebook auto-generated, and I'm thinking, wow, Big Brother's watching, right? Like,
I mean,
it's crazy.
It's incredible. You know, you look at Facebook, and what started as a social media company is not a social media. It's a tech conglomerate. You know, in what they're doing, and it's incredible to see. You know, and I think that's why you have to be extremely tapped in. But you might have created a very conventional product, but the good thing is there's a lot of people who are really skilled in that field now, and so there's a lot of things that could be very commoditized in that social marketing space, and so that might be something that you need help with. You know, if we can get you that right marketing or branding person, let's go ahead and plug them right in.
Yeah, and go. Have you had to date a favorite entrepreneur? Are you allowed to tell us if you had?
So there are a couple. Their episodes haven't aired yet, so I want to have some surprises there.
Okay.
But there's been some that, you know, you just talk to them and you hear their story and their passion, and it's just, you almost just say, listen, here's a check, we're going to invest. You know,
yeah, we're going to jump on board.
Yeah, we're going to jump on board and follow you because you believe that no matter what it is, like this person's going to get it done. You know, and so they might not have had the best product, they might not have had the best pitch, but when you talk to them, there's something genuine, there's something real, and you say, you know what, this is what I want to back right now. She or he is going to get to that place.
What would you consider more important, financial success or emotional stability?
For myself or for the entrepreneur? The entrepreneur, probably financial. You know, no, I think both, and I think it's really rare to find. You know, like there's so many products, there's so many investments, there's so many startups. I really want to attach myself to something that I'm really emotional about. But the flip side of that is a lot of times when I'm really emotional about an industry or a product, you sometimes try to overlook and overcompensate and then say, you know what, I believe in this just because I believe in that industry or that, you know, that concept so much. And that's when I scrutinize myself even more. And that's when I take the extra meeting or spend the extra time, because I have to say, is this a passion project or is this a business? You know, and so a lot of times, like, I have that strong passion for something, but I got to say, all right, I'm an investor at the end of the day, or do I want to just donate my time?
And I think the best would be to couple that as often as you can with passion translating to a successful business. You see it, you know, Branson, for example.
Yeah.
He really had a passion for what he was doing, and every business that he's propelled forward has moved forward because of the passion that he's put into it.
Absolutely. Like, you look at Virgin America as a perfect example. Like, you go onto that plane, it's a different feeling, and the customer satisfaction is different. Like, that's an amazing experience because it started with him. You know, and like, I think that's really rare to find. But if you can find those rare people like a Richard Branson, then it just has this trickle down effect. You know, and like, everybody wants to be associated, everyone wants to be a part of it. And I think that's really rare to find.
One of the things I was on a radio show this morning. I host on LA Talk Radio, and we were talking about passion and passion in business. And I think what we came to the conclusion was that when you have a passion for something, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't feel like work, it's fun. And when it's fun, people resonate to that fun energy. The money starts to trickle in because people believe in your passion. And so it's just a snowball effect.
Yeah.
And I think it really speaks to the importance of carving out some time at some point in your life, regardless of what age you're at, to really have that conversation with yourself. Am I doing something I love?
Yeah. Yeah, because if you don't, then you're going to wake up and you've been in that job for 20 years, you know? And so, you know, I think if you're fortunate enough to be able to find that, you know, and I think people find it at different ages, you know, and I was fortunate enough that I found it at a young age, and then I just ran with it, and I've loved what I've done. And even though I've been in different industries, I've never done anything that I didn't really love, that I didn't have that passion behind.
Steve Jobs, I think it was quoted as saying something along the lines of, I would wake up every morning and I would look myself in the mirror and I would ask myself, do I want to be doing what I'm doing today?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that was no for too many days in a row, I would take the time to course correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's very clearly why, again, Steve Jobs became Steve Jobs. And unfortunately, my experience with most people is that they get onto a path and they feel some sort of need to stay on it.
Yeah.
Whether it's because I'm raising a family, or because I'm paying my mortgage, or because I've always done this, my dad owned the business. But I think that we as human beings really have the opportunity to take our lives into our own hands.
Yeah.
And create a life where we are satisfied with our day.
Absolutely. And I think a great thing about Steve Jobs is, you know, Steve Jobs was fired multiple times and then kind of came back. And so I think coupled with passion has to be resiliency, you know, and I think, like, you're going to get knocked down. You know, there's going to be adverse situations, even if you're extremely passionate, but it's how you handle these, you know, highs and lows. And I think resiliency is a big part coupled with passion, and that's a big key for success.
Which other traits would you consider highly important on your list of top 3?
So I would say time management and being organized. Like, I'm a very detailed and structured person. I wake up at the same time every day, you know, and so.
Do you have a morning routine?
I have a morning routine. So I get up at 5:30 every day, you know, and part of that is I like to get up, I'd say, before the rest of the world is getting up, you know, and so, you know, I like to work out in the morning. I like to always read the newspaper. I like to always spend my time that before I get up with my wife and my son, you know, my 2-year-old son, and my wife's pregnant too.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have another boy coming as well.
Congratulations.
Next month.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
So exciting.
I like to have my time, you know, because I want to make sure I have a balance of work, family time, and then time for myself. And so I think the only way I can do that is to have structure, you know. And so part of it is every morning I have my routine, and then when everyone else gets up, that's when I kind of start my day with them.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I wake up at 5:30 too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I have my between 5:30 and 7:30 my regiment, and it includes reading what I want to read in the morning, getting that 30-minute time. Doing my workout, having, you know, my day organized before I get out into the world. And I think it's so very important to have that, because if you wake up, you're running late for work, you check your emails, things are blowing up, your day is going to start off on the wrong foot, and it usually tends to stay that way.
Absolutely. And so I think that was something from early on. It's like time management was everything, you know, and I think that was one of the biggest traits that fortunately, I think I learned from my football days. And so playing at UCLA, when we used to play, you'd have practice in the morning, then there were only a few hours a day that you could take class, then you'd have practice in the afternoon, then you'd have study hall. So I got used to, at such a young age, being on a structure that I said, I loved it. You know, when I had this open time, or when there was situations that I wasn't structured, it was tough for me, you know, and that's when I started to go around and say, what am I doing? And I needed that structure, and I think I've just continued it on to whatever I've done. So
time management 1, how about number 2?
So I think the biggest thing is personality, you know, and I think you can have success.
Is that across any sector, or any business line, or just entrepreneurship?
I think across the board, obviously, but especially in entrepreneurship, egos have to be checked at the door. And I think, you know, you can have success early on in a company or another career, and I think sometimes people try to carry that over, you know, and I'd say is, listen, that was yesterday, that was old news, you know, this is a brand new venture. And so I like to always say I want to surround myself with people as smart, if not smarter than me, and a lot of times there's a lot smarter people surrounding them, and I'm 100% completely fine saying that. And so I try to find the best people, you know, and I check the ego at the door, and I say, listen, I want to build something together, you know. And I think that also came from being an athlete. It's the name on the front being much more important than the name on the back, and so I've carried that over to business, and I look for people who say, like, I'm really honored to be a part of this team, and I don't care who gets it done. Let's just go get it done.
Talk to me a little bit about the importance of leadership versus doership.
Yeah, so I think leadership and doership are two different things. Doership is someone who isn't able to sometimes delegate, you know, and so I think people who are able to delegate and check and give away responsibility, it's a very difficult thing to do, especially when it's your own, you know. And I think leadership is understanding when to delegate, but also being able to take the criticism as well. Maybe it wasn't time for someone to get promoted, maybe you waited too long, maybe it was something you should have held on to. So I think there's a lot of people who feel like I just need to get something done, rather than thinking through, is this the appropriate time for them to be having those responsibilities.
Is there a difference between a leader and a manager?
So a leader and a manager, I'd say, isn't someone who's going to set things in motion. I think a leader is someone who's going to see the strategy, who's going to see the game plan,
has the
right?
vision.
Is the quarterback of that team, right? A manager needs to manage it. Once these strategies are implemented, they need to make sure everyone's lined up in the same spot, you know. And I usually always go back to sports analogies, but I think it's kind of where I come from. But the leader's got to see the game plan. He's got to be that, he or she has to be that quarterback. But you have to have great lieutenants. You have to have great managers, you know. And I'm not saying one is more or less important, because if you have one less or too many, you can have a broken funnel, you know, and that's when you start to have this backlog. So I think that's the biggest differences I've usually seen between the two. We were talking before the show started, and I was saying to you that I'm from Canada, so I'm a big hockey fan. Go
and
Kings.
You surprised me by saying that you play hockey. You're
Go
a massive Kings fan.
Absolutely.
You also talked to me about playing football. So is there a through line, a common through line in sports that you also see in business?
Absolutely.
Regardless of what sector the business is in?
Absolutely. So whether it's hockey or it's football, they're both team sports, you know, and I think I've always excelled and I've always loved being a part of team sports rather than individual sports. And what it taught me, I think, at a young age is that you need to depend on people from all different backgrounds, you know, and just like when you're working together, I use the analogy name on the front. everybody came from a different environment. You can be different race, whatever it may be, but you're here trying to achieve a common goal. And it's the same thing in the workplace. And I think what helped me is being able to interact with people at a very early age. So when I carried it over to the workplace, when I worked on Wall Street, when I worked in my other companies, there were people from all over the place. And I felt very, very comfortable, working in an environment where I didn't know anybody, where you're meeting people for the first time, where you didn't grow up together. And I think playing in team sports is so important because I think it teaches you at a very young age, this is how things are supposed to be run.
So you'll be putting your kids into team sports?
Love it. I don't know about football, and I look, and it's, as much as I love it, I think, it's unfortunate kind of what we've seen now with concussions and, and everything that's happening in football, but team sports, whether it be soccer or basketball or baseball, I think are so important at a young age. And I think a lot of that has worked really well. And I think a lot of people I've worked with before have come from the athletic or the military background, and I think a lot of that discipline, a lot of that structure, a lot of that team environment has worked really well. Now there's tremendously successful people who didn't come from these, but I think for me, it's really easy for me to kind of gravitate to people who have come from that environment before. And
you speak the same language.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
How alive in 2017, as we head to 2017, is the American dream these days?
I think it's more alive. I think obviously there's been a lot of noise around, obviously, everything that's happened with the election, but I think there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur.
How so? Why?
So if you look at just from the investing standpoint, there's so many more angel investors now than there ever been before. And it used to be 10 years ago, angel investors were very scarce. And even VCs, I think a lot of that knowledge was very hidden from the entrepreneur. Now with everything on social media, with everything kind of being out there, with this flow of information and ideas, a lot of that's been commoditized. And a lot of people understand it more, both from the investing side, and you've also had a lot of these equity crowdfunding rules that are passed now. So instead of institutional guys, retail investors can now crowdfund ideas. And so I think it's really, really important that there's brand new platforms. It's never been an easier time. On the flip side, there's never been more and more competition, and so I think people really want to create a job rather than going to see, I'm going to go work at this company and be there for 40 years.
Right. And I think the landscape has really changed. I know I do some work and I focus on the Gen Xers, who are sort of people born between the late 60s and early 80s.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was identified was the fact that these people really are missing a sense of that same security that their fathers or their grandfathers had, which was just that I will retire to a paid pension at some point, that I will have these certainties, and those have been blown out of the water now.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of why our generation, the millennials and then moving forward, have said, nothing's guaranteed anymore. You have every single opportunity by being here, but you got to go out there and create. And the good thing is there's never been more money available, more platforms, more knowledge. Like this is the golden time, I think, in what you've seen with disruption in transportation with Uber and lodging with Airbnb. All these industries that have been generational big conglomerates are now being disrupted. And you look at the value of Uber, a 60, 70 billion company, it took a lot of these other guys 70, 100 years to create that value, and people are able to do that and touch people all over the world.
And the amount of smarts that has gone into these businesses, I had this conversation last night. I was in an Uber. We called the Uber, it took 1 minute to show up, and we went home. And I said, remember the days when we had to get on the phone, call the taxi company, wait on hold for 10 minutes, wait 25 minutes for the taxi to show up? I mean, that's gone. And that was just innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, I always look at Uber and Airbnb, it was a sign of the time. So if you think about 2010, when these came out, we were going through the Great Recession, right? And there was a time, maybe 2006, 2005, 2007, people might not have thought about taking on this extra job driving someone, or actually having someone rent out a room in their house, and all this may have seemed foreign. The biggest hotel company in the world doesn't own any hotels, and so it's a perfect sign of innovation. It's a perfect sign of people being on smartphones, where it's different than just having a cell phone. People are having these mini computers now in their hand that have GPS, and it's a sign of where we were in the economy. And I think a perfect storm of innovation, smarts, and timing, and I always use timing as a big thing in starting a business. In 2006, 2005, there wasn't a penetration of smartphones yet. We were in a big bull market and a great economy. I don't know if these things would have taken off, but the ideas and the smarts behind them could have been there as well.
Right, but there was a demand at the time.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Bitcoin as a currency?
So I think there's been obviously a lot of discussion, and I think there was a lot of noise with Mt. Gox and everything that happened when these things kind of fell off. The underlying technology behind it, and I know a lot of people are talking about this to innovate healthcare, to innovate the financial services. I think Bitcoin is just the tip of everything that we're starting to do. I'm not a super deep tech guy, and I know there's been a lot of discussions about it, but I think an alternative currency is going to be in the future.
And just for our audience, if you're not familiar with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is an electronic currency that people are trying to push to take over monetary physical money. And it's been, it's had an interesting run the last few years.
Yeah, and it's all about trading on a brand new platform that's supposed to be kind of the new internet, and I don't know if we're ready yet for that.
I was going to say, because there's been all this talk in the media with all this election about computer hacking. How safe is going digital on all platforms?
So, I know,
your opinion.
and I'm not an expert, but I know Bitcoin is a tip of the currency of blockchain, and the blockchain is this big underlying technology that's supposed to be pushing and servicing all this, and so that's a whole another side of it. But I think, listen, overall, if you keep things safe, you keep things protected, you change it, at the end of the day, there's nothing you can really do at some point. But I think if you can be smart, then that's what you try to do.
Sure, absolutely. If you had to go back and talk to your 12-year-old self, what were you dreaming about at 12? Were you dreaming about Wall Street?
No, I was dreaming about two things. I was definitely dreaming about hockey. I was dreaming about a Stanley Cup. I would say just wait 20 years and you're going to get it. So, and we got 2 of them. So extremely happy for my Kings. For my Kings.
Yeah,
so
Kings.
Once I have my Kings plug here, then I can move on. And I was always looking at stocks, you know, and this is when you really saw the emergence of E-Trade and starting to trade online and going from checking stock quotes in a newspaper, you know,
physically opening the newspaper,
to being able to do it daily. And I think that's when I got hooked, you know, and I think the idea of equity where I could own a piece of these companies. You know, these companies have been around for 2 years, they've been around for 50 years, right? And it's like you can have fractional ownership and you felt a part of it at that point was so exciting, you know, and like if I was buying Disney and a big movie came out, then I felt really attached to it at that point, you know, and I remember one of the first stocks I bought was Marvel, you know, I was a big, you know, and I remember looking at the comic, and obviously that's a big franchise for Disney, and so, just feeling like whatever it was that I was excited about at the time, I could kind of touch and invest in was just so exciting to me.
And it's interesting that you fast forward 20 years and that's exactly what you're doing.
Exactly. So, I mean, it took, I would say, a couple of turns and a couple of zigzags, but I couldn't imagine doing anything better. You know, I love getting up every day and thinking about the world differently and thinking about how I'm going to help people and, you know, ways we can innovate around the show. And
that's why I love the show, is because it really is a feel-good show.
Yeah.
And it has that message of hope. And it's a very supportive show.
Definitely.
Which, again, is contrary to a lot of what we see in the media these days.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you don't want to be a show that everybody invests in every company every time, you know, and I think that would get a little bit boring. And you don't want to be on the other side where you're really putting down entrepreneurs for maybe forgetting to say something or maybe missing up on a number. And like, it's tough to go out there, you know, and you're in front of all these people and all these viewers across the country. And a lot of times it might be the first time they're really doing a pitch, not in front of friends and family. And so I want to encourage that, you know, because we've all stood in those shoes before, and we say, listen, you have a great product, or you have a great idea, but it needs a ton of work, or you know what, I don't understand this at all, you know, and that's and neither do the consumers.
And then let's go back to the drawing board though and figure it out.
Absolutely, and I want them, and I think the thing that's great about the show is, you know, I talked to all the contestants afterwards, and everyone has a great experience, you know, and I think a lot of times you've seen on other shows, people are really upset, and, you know, they might not have gotten the investment.
They feel attacked, or they feel put down.
And like, I don't want people to feel that way. I want people to innovate, because some of these people are going to create products that are going to change the world, you know, and if they can come through our platform and it's us kind of supporting them at this level, that's incredible.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that was a big reason why I was so excited about producing and signing on, is that feel was there. You know, everybody kind of felt that same way, and I think that was really important to me, because that's the way I view it.
And I think with a show like this, it has the legs to run on for a number of years, because the concept of the show won't change, but the ideas coming through the show are always going to be different and engaging and creative.
Absolutely. And like, we do a lot of beverages, and there's always a new beverage. You know, there was one we looked at that had turmeric in it, you know, and so like, whatever the new flavor of the day is, you know, like, people will always innovate around that space, and there's always going to be room for that. And that's why I love the consumer product space. It's not a technology that becomes stale after 6 months, you know.
Now, how difficult, taking your soft drink example, for example, your drinks, how difficult is it to launch a product like that in a space of Coca-Cola and PepsiCo.
Yeah. So I think, turmeric is something important, and especially here, I think it resonates in LA, is that people are becoming very health conscious now, and it's not just something that's here in LA, it's across the country. Like, people want healthier alternatives. And so I think there's a lot of room to innovate in those spaces. And you look at a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, and if they're light in one of these product categories, it's really nice for them to put, just kind of pick it up and put it right into their shelf, And
so is that the ultimate goal, is to take these companies to a place where you can IPO it, for example, take it out to market, or have it bought by one of the big pharmaceuticals or whatever the industry they're in?
So I always use the advice is, you don't know.
Like, when should someone sell? Should they sell?
I always say you don't build a business to say, when am I going to sell it? I'm going to sell it in 2 years. I'm going to sell it in 3 years. You build a business, you can innovate around a product, and then one day you get bought. Somebody comes in, or one day it's that time for you to IPO. And so obviously you need to have a roadmap, and you need to have projections, you need to have a business plan. But I think sometimes people get very nearsighted and saying, all right, within 3 years it needs to be sold or IPO. And it's like, listen, that may have been true, but you might have had this new massive opportunity. You might have acquired another company. There might have been a new avenue you went into that pushes things back.
Changes the landscape.
And you're a much bigger company now. And so having that flexibility and understanding, I say, listen, companies are still going public. I know more of them are going private now, and especially with all this venture-backed raising, I think there's been a lot of people who have wanted to stay private, but the best way to get a liquidation for your shareholders and everyone is to go public, and so obviously that's a great route, or you can get picked up by a strategic or a sponsor as well. So,
and roll yourself into that if you so want it.
Absolutely. And I think every company, every story, every beverage product is different. They might be coming out and innovating in a space that a lot of these beverage products have that category, but they're doing something different, or it's better tasting, or whatever it may be. Then it might not be the right fit. Then you just go and you compete, And
I think, especially as we were talking about before, in the world of e-commerce, you're not just opening a store and servicing your town anymore.
No.
You are servicing almost 7 billion potential customers.
Yeah.
So that's massive.
Yeah, and I think because you can touch so many eyeballs now, supply chain issues have never been more relevant. And I think that's something growing up, you don't learn about distribution and supply chain, and so that's something that's very, very easily commoditized by being on the right partner, and so what I always advise people too is, outside of taking that financial capital, get intellectual capital. And behind that means someone who's going to have those right, kind of fit for you, and say, all right, I'm a supply chain guy, or I've worked, for 10 years at a company that really dealt with scaling large scale, or this is a domestic product, or this is something that we really want to get into China or across the seas. This is how you do it. Or maybe you license it, or maybe you JV it. And so that's something that I want the entrepreneur to continue to innovate around the product. Those are things that, and it's the hardest thing to do as an entrepreneur, is hand off that football to somebody else and say, listen, I'm going to bring you on. I'm going to trust you with doing this.
With part of my baby.
But you have to do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, you have to do it if you want to grow.
Absolutely.
And if you want to compete in the world we're living in, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you had to talk to your kids, your kids grow up in a few years, and they say, Daddy, I want to be a snowboarder.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
So, depends how old they are, 7 or 27. And I think for them, I'm going to be open-minded. I want them to explore. And I think, everybody kind of finds their right path at a different time. And just because I might have found it earlier on doesn't mean that that's the right path for them. It doesn't mean it's the right path for other entrepreneurs. Sure. And so I think the things I look for is, if someone's an amazing snowboarder, right, and they win a gold medal in the X Games, and the next Shaun White, whether they are or not, if they're passionate about it, if they enjoy it, if they're a great person, if they're working hard, if they're doing well in school, those are all those things that I say, great, like, this is a great, well-rounded person, like, they're going to go out there and do great things. And so I don't want to push them and say, listen, you need to go to business school, you need to go to medical school, you need to go to law school. I think there's a lot of great people out there who just need the experience over than just going to school or going down this path. And so I would be really open, as long as they're great people. And
I heard a quote recently, and it said that success is measured by the forward progression towards a lofty ideal. So it's not measured financially, it's not measured by the number of cars in your garage, it's measured by how willing and able and productive are you on a daily basis towards pushing towards a goal, whatever goal that may be.
Yeah, and I think even having, and I think it's a great quote, a lofty idea or a goal is so hard to do. It's so hard to set, and those things change, and your priorities change, and all of a sudden, I think setting that and then going after it and then being realistic and chasing it or setting it into a new course is so important. But it's great. I think it's so hard for someone, even if you told people to write down what's the one goal they want to start to strive for and how are they going to get there and how they're going to do it, it's really difficult for people to do, you know? And so I think it's really, if you can actually identify, I think it's amazing to do.
Goals for you 20 years from now?
Oh, still doing Hatched.
Let's hope so.
And still doing this, you know?
There we go.
But no, I think, listen, I love working with people, you know, and I think whether I look at myself as kind of a coach, you know, in this situation. And so I love to continue off this platform. And I think as technology continues to grow, there might be more outlets for us to innovate. And whether it's just TV or we're actually doing it, you know, just streaming it online now. And like 10 or 12, you know, 20 years ago, could you imagine just having something that's streamed and touched millions of people online, you know, and not having a single TV camera doing it. But
well, you know, the thing with the televisions now is they're sort of going the same way as the rotary phone. You know, they're going to be obsolete because why would you bother with a TV if you can walk around with one in your hand?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think people are starting to unplug more from the traditional kind of cable models as well. And so I want to continue to innovate around platforms. I want to continue to help. You know, I love being an investor. And so I think I'm going to continue down this path.
Hatch sounds great. Can you tell the audience one more time where we can watch it?
Yeah, so check your local listings, obviously across the country. Here in LA, KCAL 9, just CBS here local in LA, 1:30 p.m. on Saturdays.
Fantastic. And if we want to catch up with you outside of Hatched, you said you do some consulting?
Yeah, I do.
Is it sort of under the radar? Or?
Under the radar, but obviously, you know, all my social media handles, reach
can
out
be
to
found,
me. Absolutely. I'm here in LA, I'm local. And if you guys ever have any products that you think would be a great fit for Hatch, we're just about to film the second half. We're still looking at some products and finalizing whether it's for this season or next. HatchTV.com is the website. Submit them. We would love to take a look at it. Obviously, we get a lot of submissions and entries, but if someone has something great and a great story behind it, I think we look for great stories too. Submit it. We would love to see it.
Absolutely fantastic. Steve, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure. I don't know where an hour went, but the conversation flowed.
It's amazing.
It was great.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love talking to people that know their stuff and that are passionate about it, and you're reflecting a lot of that.
I appreciate it. Listen, it was a pleasure being here, and I'll come by. If you have me again, I'll come by anytime.
We're very excited about Hatched. If there's ever any new television projects you're working on, please do let us know, because we'd love to follow you through your career path.
Perfect.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Once again, folks, thank you for being with us. I'm your host, Katerina Cozias. Don't forget that you can catch this episode on our website, AFTERBUZZTV.com. You can also catch us on YouTube and via iTunes podcast. So you can IV us into your arms here and get as much Steve as you'd like. Thank you so much for being with us, Steve, once again. And thank you, audience, for being with us. And we'll see you again next time.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.